So yeah, my name's Mark Wolfe. I'm one of the engineers at Versant. I'm also an APN ambassador for Versant, which is the partner network, Amazon partner network. So basically my role within Versant is mainly around cloud practice, all that sort of stuff. So what I try and do is try and swat up on some of the new announcements from Amazon. In this particular area, basically around IP networking, there's been a lot of new announcements this year. But what I wanted to do just to start with was basically just to go back a step in the theme of like some of the old school announcements. What I wanted to just talk a bit about was IP networking in Amazon. So basically Amazon supports IPv4 and IPv6 networking. Personally, most of the commercial stuff I do is in IPv4. Is there anyone using IPv6 commercially in AWS? Yeah, I pretty much thought so. So I've done a bit of work on IPv6. I'm a really big fan of it, but it really doesn't seem to be getting a lot of traction within AWS. So what I wanted to have a bit of a chat about was good old IPv4 networking. And just to go over some of the basics. So I know people who attend this meetup are either at either end of the spectrum. So how many people here are creating and using VPCs within AWS? Yeah, so quite a few people. So I'm just going to go over a couple of the basics just to get started. And then I'll get into some of what has changed over the last reInvent. So before we start, what I normally work with people around, especially within the practice sort of sector, and the consulting sector, is certainly for new customers or anyone just starting out with AWS, or even with a couple of years experience, there's always that golden rule of just keep it simple. So before I dive into all these new amazing features within Amazon, which there are so many of them this year, I just want to keep a focus on those sort of themes. So keep it simple, plan for the future, but don't build the future now. So if at some point in the next 10 years you may need 10 VPCs, don't build them all now. Just solve the problems you have now and just build what you need. But what I do normally have a bit of a chat about is laying some of the groundwork for VPC networking and stuff like that. So there are a few precursors that I normally chat to people about doing. One of them is before you start, although you may not think you need it right now, at least keep a basic register of the IPv4 ranges you're using. There's a few really good open source projects around this. It does a whole load of stuff around traditional data center networking. But it is still very helpful for, especially for CIDR ranges. Who here has fought with spreadsheets and stuff like that around trying to divide IP ranges and stuff like that? Anyone? Yeah, it's like a total nightmare. So what I try and do is try and use some of the open source tools just to help out with that, and possibly keep a good record for for people who use the system after you. Likewise, DNS, get all your zones into Route 53. There's a lot of great features that come with having your zones natively within Route 53, kind of goes without saying. One that I speak about a lot is secrets. Basically, whenever you provision Amazon services like RDS and all those things, there is always lots of secrets to handle, manage, and ideally not put in your code base. So please try and use some of the services. AWS Secret Service, Secret Management Service is really cool, and SSM is the one that I traditionally use a lot of, which is a system manager parameter store. And likewise, you can now import your certificates. Rather than using the old command line IAM way, you can actually import your certificates into Certificate Manager now, as well as using the auto-generated one. So these are things that normally don't come up when people are just starting out building a VPC infrastructure, but they are key to keeping things tidy and sort of laying a bit of groundwork for that environment going forward. The other thing I would like to say is before you start handcrafting VPC templates or structures, please try and use something as a starting point, an open source sort of template or an open source environment. This particular project by Wittix, which is a consultancy in Germany, comes with a whole load of out-of-the-box documentation, templates, all of the starting points. So if you're just getting into AWS or you want to go back to the drawing board and start again, this is an amazing resource. It's got effectively everything that you will need to write. If you don't use CloudFormation, which I know a lot of people don't, you can at least use it as a base for your designs if you port to Terraform or whatever it is you use. Another good grab bag of templates is AWS did a bunch of startup-focused templates as well. I borrow stuff from there from time to time. I find also, just on this, who here uses GitHub search to find code and stuff like that within? It is one of the best resources around. Like there's a lot of really good stuff on GitHub, and once you learn a few tricks around, look for YAML, look for the keywords in either Terraform or CloudFormation, you can find a lot of good code online. So pretty much before you start with VPC, it's probably better to have a look at some of the off-the-shelf stuff. So an example of that is beautiful isometric drawings from Wittix. So within the documentation, they have a whole load of options as far as configuration and some points around what they basically provision. So my go-to starting point is these templates. They're also very well written as far as inputs, outputs, the way they're parameterized, even the way they're laid out in the CloudFormation console. It's really, really helpful. So back to VPCs and IP networking. So really, at this point in time, there are a myriad of services and resources that are attached to VPCs. Really, the thing that blows my mind is every year there's more to learn. I go back to, and have been certainly with a flight back from Las Vegas and some research for this talk, just reviewing some of the starter videos, the YouTube videos. Most people, I've been using AWS for maybe 7 years or something like that. I still learn stuff in those starter videos. There's a lot of good stuff and a lot of the basics that you just miss because there's so many damn announcements from Amazon. So if you are getting started, or if you just want to do a bit of a refresher, this talk is really, really good. And what I've done throughout this particular talk, and I'll throw the slides up online, is just highlight some of the talks that have been circulating on our Slack and also just been a point of discussion online. So hopefully you can basically catch up on some of the VPC fundamentals. Gina, this lady goes through a whole load of very, very good detail, so I'm not going to replicate that in this talk. I'm just going to give you a bit of an overview. So onto the new stuff. One of the things that is changing with reInvent and the releases around it is VPC peering. How many people have to manage something like this? Awesome. This is one of the most challenging things I've ever dealt with. Just the amount of attributes and configuration you have to keep in, say, Ansible or a configuration management tool is absolutely crazy. So I am really, really happy that Amazon has released this whole transit gateway. Now, the one thing I would say is it's probably not the tool that I would crack out at the start of an engagement, but certainly with larger organizations where you've got legacy on-prem stuff, this is going to be a massive benefit. And it's going to tidy up a whole load of configuration. And some of the routing, which I'm just starting to dig into, is really, really interesting. And I've got a couple of talks after this. But the other thing I was going to say was some of the monitoring as well. Direct Connect and the VPN services have been pretty basic as far as monitoring in my experience. And seeing a bit more consolidated monitoring and also the ability to use some of these services across accounts is a really, really good step in the right direction as far as I'm concerned. Who's had a look at this transit gateway? Yes, you have? A couple of people. I had a look at the documentation, like the paint has not even dried on this service. Like there's no images in the documentation and stuff like that. It's very, very early days. I was impressed that CloudFormation support's already there. And there's a whole load of really good videos from reInvent. So one of those videos called out a bit of an example of some of the edge connectivity that we run into from time to time. So this is basically where you want to have multiple VPCs with peering, and then multiple VPNs back to on-prem for resilience and all that sort of stuff. And to contrast that with the new pattern, mind blown. Like this is going to be a lot simpler to manage. And there's a lot more coming around this product. So I would totally recommend reading up on this if you're working in a larger organization, even just doing a couple of POCs around it and just getting a bit of a feel for what's coming down from Amazon. But at the moment, it only supports VPNs. It doesn't support Direct Connect, and there are a few other extras that they're adding to it. So I think it's still a little bit new. It also hooks into Control Tower and one of the other, like there's a security related product which it hooks into. So it will be really interesting to see. There's a really good guide which I've linked in the either the next slide or at the end in links, which basically talks about some of the applications of this particular product. Going back to that first point around keeping it simple, this product is not for everyone, but it is very useful for organizations that have an existing multi-VPC architecture, especially where they're spanning regions or spanning data center connectivity. And like my really big challenge around some of these architectures is around using appliances and all that sort of stuff to sort of consolidate some of it. This will hopefully simplify and reduce the cost of some of those applications. But you know, there's a range of really good resources around this. I found something which was talking a bit about like the new and old, and just having a bit of a chat about like why you would use transit VPCs in the first place. So that application and that problem domain hasn't really changed. It's just this new product's come in to simplify it. And I was very happy to see that day one CloudFormation, like there wasn't that many products that released day one CloudFormation, but this was one of them. And normally the VPC team and stuff like that is pretty good. So I have a couple of YouTube links. This first talk is mind-blowing, and I've borrowed a couple of slides from that. And the second one talks a bit about VPN. So did anyone know, or has anyone had a look at the fact that Amazon is releasing a client, a VPN client for connecting into VPCs directly? I'm like, finally we can just connect in and access, especially development environments and isolated environments. This can be super helpful. There's a whole section in this talk, the bottom one, around that particular capability. I haven't tried it. I only literally found this video today because someone posted it in Slack. And then I was going through it going, wow, there's a lot to take in that video. And a lot of stuff is changing. One of the areas that they cover in this particular video is around BYO IP ranges. So you know you can actually bring your own IP ranges to VPC now. So he talks a lot through that particular problem. We've had customers in banking and a couple other areas where they already have Class B ranges, legacy ranges, and they have a whole load of rules around who's trusted to connect back to internal services, and these sorts of things are going to be a really big boon to those organizations. So one of the other things that was demonstrated, but kind of snuck out like a week before reInvent, was something called RAM, which is basically AWS Resource Access Manager. Who's heard of this? Yep, a few people. Effectively, if you're working in multi-account environments, this will help you share a range of resources across those accounts. So one of the ones that blew my mind was you can actually share subnets across accounts. So if I set up a bunch of subnets, I can grant access to accounts, and then those accounts can launch their own EC2 hosts into those subnets. So this will be a boon for anyone who's running sort of Windows workloads or highly connected workloads, and anyone who wants to have a shared like location for VPC, like common services or standard services. But interestingly, the owner of the subnets won't be able to affect or change your hosts. So it's really clear that there's a lot of work going on around areas of control and IAM to basically enable this. The other one was resolver rules, which is about, from my understanding, a very early understanding, is around cross-region and cross-account resolution for VPCs. I understand it is a little bit expensive at the moment, but it fills a gap that we normally put DNS servers all over the VPCs to allow local resolution and stuff like that. So hopefully this helps a bit with that. And really, like this particular product especially really shouts that that Amazon is listening. Like they are bringing out products now that are outside of their comfort zone, but have been asked by pretty much every customer migrating to Amazon. So this is a really, really good thing. The other one is license configuration. So they've got a service, which I only just got a bit of a hint around the ability to pool licenses and manage licenses within the Amazon console, and then share those licenses out to other AWS accounts for Oracle licenses, Microsoft licenses, and stuff like that. And the other thing which I still haven't messed around with is the ability to actually share transit gateways across accounts as well. But again, this is really very new. So Amazon is really good at keeping their documentation up to date. So keep an eye on some of these products. I'll throw the slides up. It's still very, very early days. Another one that came up, which is around this whole ability to share subnets, is this concept of shared VPCs. So having ranges or having a subnet where you can set up either Windows Active Directory or any of the security products that require a central control plane within an account that you'd normally have to like somehow peer into all of your subnets and then mess around with NACLs and all that sort of stuff. There are some features coming with shared VPCs and the transit VPC to control traffic flow between those services. So again, really good news for anyone who's got is doing migration workloads or Windows workloads. So the other one that came up was private link. So private link is basically the ability to drop a service into anyone else's account. Organizations are using this like Splunk and a few other organizations to be able to provide a service and a private endpoint inside your VPC. So independent of, there's no connecting over the internet, there's no internet access required. You can provision a VPC, set up an LB in front of your service, and then provide services across any number of AWS accounts. There's a whole process around permitting access to these endpoints, which is very similar to what you get when you use VPC endpoints for services, for Amazon services. The only caveat, which I explain to most teams, is DNS is kind of magic for that service. So just be a little bit careful. The benefit is once you drop that service into a VPC, the E&I IP addresses don't ever change. So you can, if you want to, just put those IP addresses in your DNS. But you have to be careful because they're only available within that VPC. I've still got to try this out. There's a whole load of notes around this and how transit VPCs work. So I've still got to try out what the limitations are. But effectively, because a picture's worth 1,000 words, here's just a simple example of how someone in one account in the same region can effectively share a service from one VPC across to another VPC. And you have a whole mechanism to grant access, revoke access, request access, etc. Has anyone used Private Link? Yeah, cool. That is probably about the equivalent in our office as well. It's still very new. It's still very, yeah, you got a question?
Yeah, what is the service? What service would you be sharing across?
So any TCP-based service. So it uses Network Load Balancer. Have you heard of Network Load Balancer? It's basically just a TCP load balancer like HA proxy or anything like that. Any service that uses TCP at the moment, people do use NLB plus application load balancer to share HTTPS services and such like. So any web service. So a perfect example is you've got a SaaS that does big data or logging or analytics, but you don't want to put it on the internet to grant another customer access. You can literally set up a business workflow, and my understanding is it also hooks into the AWS marketplace where you can sell these endpoints. When the endpoint's set up, a bunch of metadata is available to you as connections come in around what source account they came from and what source IP range. So well worth having it to read, but it is really like complicated. So it is like if you're just new to Amazon, don't start here. But it definitely of interest if you're really interested in providing private services within a region to customers or across accounts. This is really, really good. The benefit is no one sees your shit in your VPC. No one sees anything behind the scenes. So everything's hidden. It's an encapsulation layer. So you can hide all of the infrastructure that you have in your VPC and just drop an interface into that customer's VPC. So it's very, very handy. So in summary, basically IP networking in AWS is constantly changing. So that starter video that I posted in the slides, I learned stuff off that. There is just so many things changing every year. I totally recommend at least watching that intro video just to catch up on what's moving around. Even terminology, some of the diagrams and iconography changes. So it's very, very helpful to catch up on some of these talks. And reInvent this year has been amazing. Like the same day talks happened, they were online. So very, very cool. But again, keep things simple. Keep them as simple as possible. Don't over-engineer networking stuff because you'll just pay for it. And if you possible, use off-the-shelf templates and open source. So really that brings my talk to an end. Is there anyone got any questions? Yes?
What's the pricing model for the private link?
So the question was, what's the pricing model for the private link? So the pricing model is just what you pay for NLB plus transit data costs. So it's actually quite inexpensive to map. The overhead is that NLB is a little bit of an interesting service. It's a very low-level service. So unlike HA proxy, where you've got a stateful sort of routing layer, this is more like switching. So it's more like traditionally putting a VLAN port into someone else's VPC and just having stuff appear in your VPC. So we found it a little bit challenging to get started with, but very, very helpful once you start using it. Anyone else? No worries. Thank you very much for attending.